Hi all, welcome to another Kingscrusher radio show in the year 2016. Okay, I thought for this session this week, might have to mute the echo, pardon me. We're going to look at some Grand Prix Attack game examples this week. It happens to be a week I volunteered to do on Reddit as well, to look at the Grand Prix Attack against the Sicilian Defense. And there are certain exponents of the Grand Prix Attack which are extremely notable exponents, such as British Grandmaster Garwin Jones, and he has great versatility in using this system of choice, a large number of games. So this first one I'd like to show you, he's well known for the Bishop b5 system as well as Bishop c4. So what is the Grand Prix Attack? Okay, you might not have followed any videos in my recent playlist on YouTube, so let me just have a gentle introduction here to start off with. When you play e4 and the opponent plays the Sicilian Defense, the normal move is like knight f3 to go into an open Sicilian. That's very, very typical to play against the Sicilian. You know, that's the most trodden path in history. You just go for an open Sicilian. Now the closed Sicilian is when white plays knight c3, and usually you're going to play a closed Sicilian. But knight c3 has also got a useful purpose. It really actually suppresses d5 from black. A player called McDonald used to play against the Sicilian like this, and it became established that d5 or e6 and then d5 would often give black a good game. The modern Grand Prix Attack in particular is targeting the Tau gambit, and there was a key game, Hartston against Tau, which is on the YouTube channel today, where Mikhail Tau played black and equalised quite quickly with this gambit, this temporary pawn sack. And since then the game was quite influential, even though it was a draw. This game, Hartston against Tau, it became so influential that actually the preferred move order for the whole f4 for the Grand Prix, the McDonald attack, an upgrade in a way to the McDonald attack, was to play knight c3 first. And here, if knight c6, e6 or d6, so still consider the move f4 against any of these next move options. I think in particular players like to play it against d6 because black doesn't really then want to play for d5 later. It seems as though the d pawn's already been moved once. So especially against d6, it becomes a very popular choice just to play f4 here. But against knight c6, it's quite a popular choice, like fourth move down in my book. And against e6, it's still up there as the third most popular choice. Now, you might think it's positionally suspect to play a move like f4 so early. Now, this first notable game, I really think it's good to get a grip on some of the ideas. Oh, Simon Taylor on PlayJS, yes. Got Hartston from Gogglebox, yes. He's recently been on TV on Gogglebox. But he was British champion a couple of years. He's a very, very strong international master. So that key game's already on the channel for today. If you want to see the historical background, why this is the preferred move order on move 2 before you play f4, it's for this quick d5. So let's see now. I've found quite a few notable games, and to be honest, I focused on Garwin Jones in my research for today mainly, but I did have a look at some other ones as well. I've had a look at quite a few game examples basically, but let's have a look at Garwin Jones for a moment. Back in 2008, here's an example where he was playing against a player called Artur Zakaj. I probably pronounced that wrong, right? Who is Artur Zakaj? Also known as Artur Zaka is the only thing commented. He's apparently from Albania, born 1961, and there's no other comments to him. But anyway, let's have a look at this game. So this was in Greece, 2008, in the Euro Cup, Califia. So knight c3, we have d6, and this is the ideal thing actually. If you're a Grand Prix Attack player, you really ideally want to play black to play d6. f4 is slightly more effective, I would argue, because black has committed their d pawn. And you might ask, what's the significance of the d pawn? It's not just about battling central control. If you ever get white to play e5, then you've got a nice outpost square on f5. So anyway, f4, g6. We have knight f3, bishop g7. And here it makes a little bit more sense to maybe play the bishop c4 system actually against d6. Black has weakened some light squares a bit more, and playing the check seems as though there's less point to it here. Bishop b5, so bishop c4, and I love this attacking bishop, and we can get a very stereotypical example from this. Now when you play chess, you should try and generally play the position and not play stereotypical moves, but when you're learning ideas, it's nice to find a game which seems really stereotypical, and this looks like really a stereotypical game I'm about to show you. We have an attacking pattern already set up, basically, that if black's going to castle later, yeah, white's plan is essentially like this: queen e1, queen goes to h4 later, f5, something like bishop h6, f-file, and the bishop should coordinate for a winning attack. That's the attacking plan, and we see a bit of that in this example. So we see knight c6, white castles, e6, d3, knight ge7. We see this key move, queen e1. Yeah, queen e1. It neglects c2, but that's not a big problem here. We can always drop back the bishop. Let's put on a bit so just in case, if there's any technical things to note. You might think neglecting the c pawn to have this hack attack, is this really on? If black plays knight d4, I think we can just take it here and black will have a weak d pawn. Black didn't play knight d4. Black castled straight into this classic Grand Prix attack. So we have f5. It's a classic move to try and open up this bishop, and it also of course liberates this bishop at the same time, which makes this whole maneuver more effective, because we might want to play bishop h6 later, supported by the queen, to get rid of the key defender, to weaken the dark squares, to make either f6 or f takes somewhere more effective. We have a default rook being activated here on f1. This is a key attacking rook, this is a key attacking bishop. Black plays here d5, the bishop drops back, d takes, d takes. Now black accepts one pawn here, because it looks as though black by all rights surely had f5 covered, but white is positionally sacrificing a pawn. And if you've been following the playlist, this idea of the f-pawn sacrifice was used by Bobby Fischer in 1968 in his second retirement period. It was the only game in 1968 that Fischer played in the United States. It was a Metropolitan League match. He played it actually with black against the English opening. So it's as though Fischer has approved, has given his seal of approval on this whole f-pawn sack in an analogous position, because the English opening is like the Sicilian Defense in reverse. So we see here g takes f5. So this bishop has been opened up clearly. This bishop seems to be biting on e6 at the moment. The queen is heading for the attacking position, queen h4. The engines might like black here. The engine seems to like black here, but let's ignore that evaluation. It's easier to play for white. A normal move you might consider is knight g6. Can black do knight g6? With the g pawn not on g6, the queen can actually park here And still there's great pressure. You know, e takes f5 might be coming, knight g5 might be coming. There's great pressure. Black didn't play that. Black played knight d4, which is actually the engineer's top choice as well. Knight d4. It seems that d4 surely is a little bit of an Achilles heel in white's position. But we have this pin now. That's another nice thing about this queen on h4. It's not only targeting h7. There's a nice battery pin immediately on e7. Black takes on f3. Probably best was actually the weird looking move f6. Maybe this was necessary for black to play. That's the engine's suggestion. But black played knight takes f3 check. Now, to take is a mistake sometimes when you improve the opponent's position, especially. The rook wanted to come to f3 to shift to h3 to help the queen to hit h7 in any case. So black has just helped white significantly. For those of you just coming here, this game is Garwin Jones against Artur Zarkaj in 2008 in the Euro Cup, played in Greece. So black has just helped white increase the attacking pressure here. We have rook takes f3, and one thing about this, even if you give up the light square bishop, even if that wasn't there, you have great piece coordination. This is a very interesting, simple attacking concept, to have coordinated pieces. In a lot of openings it's difficult to achieve attacking piece coordination, but here, why is it that white has achieved nice piece attacking coordination? The thing is, white's using the default rook on f1, so as soon as f4, f5 plays, often there's even an attacking pawn in the position. Here it's been taken, but at least there's one rook going to be in the attack, and there's going to be two pieces coordinating on f7, and the queen coming to h4. It's great to get the major queen involved in the attack. So anyway, here black plays queen d4 check. We have king h1. So the knight is attacked. It moves with tempo. Knight g6 hitting the queen. The queen parks on h5. Remember, this was afforded by the pawn sack because we've dislodged the g6 pawn. So this is a very nice parked queen on h5. White is threatening things like rook h3. Yes, to hit h7. Also, rook d1 is a concern for kicking the queen off the d file, and then maybe e takes f5 to open up the bishop later. Okay, black played here f takes e4, getting another pawn, 2 pawns up. But look, spectator pieces over here, they're not doing much, are they? Rook h3, threat of mate in 1. Okay, so you might think here, yeah, black's in a spot of bother actually already, and you'd be right. Black is in a spot of bother here. Black played the move f5, and here there's two really crushing continuations, but both seem to involve a key attacking resource. When you take the h7 pawn and the opponent's got a thin check bishop, this applies to a lot of openings actually, because taking a pawn on h7, okay, it's not mating the black king, but it's weakening g6, and this is a very, very important tactical idea to be aware of, because you might be attacking things like the Sicilian Defense, the Grunfeld, a lot of systems with the thin check bishop. So you're winning the pawn on h7, you're weakening g6. So what do you think after queen takes h7, king f7 is the attacking idea of note that white should play in this position? In this particular position there's actually two really strong moves, but the more thematic you might use for the weakening of the g6 square. Can you see what white can play? White to play, if I give you 20 seconds, what would you play in this position? Any ideas on stream? All play chess. Yeah, on play chess. Someone's mentioned. Yeah. And on stream, white to play. What would you play here with white? Is that chat working? Yeah, the power of the pinned piece is illusionary. When you've got a pin, you can imagine that's an illusion, that bishop. And with that, you've also weakened g6, remember? So rook h6 hits g6, exploits the pin, threatening queen takes g6. Very limited defensive possibilities here for black. Black moved the bishop to e7, the knight to e7. But now, crushingly, well, there's a two crushing moves at least, which are more than +7 here. So next move here, white to play. 20 seconds again. Any ideas? The rook's already on h6, so please don't say rook h6. Yeah, rook f6. The power of the pin piece is illusionary, right? So it's not really guarding f6. Rook f6 check. This is dragging the king away from the bishop. If the king moves away from the bishop, we could take on g7, and we're protecting f6 there. So black, in desperation, gave up his queen. Queen takes f6. We have bishop takes f6. King takes f6. And now rook f1 was played, threatening knight takes e4 check, using the pin here. Leaving the queen to seemingly be trapped for a moment. Doesn't matter that the queen is temporarily inconvenienced, because knight takes e4 check to the rescue. We have king f7. If the king went there, then queen takes g7, for example. Now we have a new pin. The power of the pin piece is illusionary, or pawn. So guess what white plays in this position? Hack attack time. White play here. Any ideas? White's play. Rook takes f5. Yeah, using the pins. How the pinned pawn is illusionary. Knight takes, queen takes f5 check. Black resigns here. It's getting pretty stuffed here. Although technically it's two rooks against the queen. Black resigns. If king e7 check here, check, for example, check. This is going to be winning material, because of king here, then there's knight g5. These pieces are pretty helpless to defend the king, as you might imagine. And if here, check, we're going to be winning material. Knight takes c5. We're going to be winning material. Knight takes e6. Hitting, yeah, it's just going to be winning, basically. Okay, so it's pretty hopeless, actually, to carry on the king's just going to be hunted down and material's going to be won. So what did we get from that game? It was a pretty stereotypical game for bishop c4, but a finer point of note is that the move d6 made the f4 and bishop c4 system a little bit more effective. Now Going Johns, by the way, has written a book on this Grand Prix Attack, and let's have a look at a bishop b5 example. So I'm going to find now a different example, or maybe a similar example. Hold on a sec. I'm going to just checking out some different variations. So if we go back, knight c3, and we imagine a different move from black. Okay, let's imagine knight c6 in this position. So black hasn't committed the d pawn. Colin Jones has got 25 games in this, and usually actually he doesn't even play f4, he delays f4, he plays bishop b5. So it's kind of Rosalimo attack sort of system. But let's go with f4 here. And black playing now e6, as though black's interested in d5. And now it makes less sense to walk into d5 potentially if that's supported. So knight f3 just waits around for a moment. And let's imagine d5 here, which rules out the bishop c4 stuff. Now here, bishop b5 is the main move actually, in my book anyway. So we go for bishop b5, and it's a slightly different strategy, but there is a commonality, believe it or not, a more abstract view of things. So this example I'm going to show you is Colin Jones against Paul Garbett. I could show you this game example, but it's pretty long. There's an example game in there, but maybe there's some more interesting games which I can't find at the moment. I think I know where I've gone wrong. Conway. Yeah, I've gone wrong in preparation for this stream in fact, because I've looked at too many notable games and I haven't actually put them in the right order for representing the games. But hold on a sec. Alright, this is one I looked at earlier, but forget Colin Jones for a moment. Michael Adams is a very strong British grandmaster. This is one I checked over earlier, which is quite interesting. Let's have a look at this game example. So this is Adams against Loitier, played in Shulkadiki 1992. So e4 for Michael Adams. So he's the top British grandmaster at the moment in terms of FIDE rating. We have c5, knight c3. We have e6, f4. Yes, Michael Adams even played the Grand Prix Attack. d5. And we have knight f3 here. Knight f6. And now Adams plays the check. knight c6, and we have d3, bishop e7, and white takes the opportunity to double black's pawns. And although it's not as fun with the light square bishop, you shouldn't be too depressed about this. I think this is the thing. You need some versatility in how you handle the white pieces under the Grand Prix Attack system. You have to be prepared to give up your light square bishop sometimes. And here, the thing is about this position, you still have that common thing that I mentioned. Attacking piece coordination is still going to be evident here, but also there's an ingredient added of greater dark square control. By puncturing the pawn structure, you've also weakened black on the dark squares a bit. The dark square grip should be pronounced. We see castles, bishop a6, black trying to desperately liberate maybe this bishop. Adams plays e5, knight d7, and now trying to get a grip on black's c4, but black played it anyway, trying to open up this light square bishop rather desperately, I suppose you could say. D takes. The price has been paid though. It's fractured pawn structure. Rook e1, knight b6, and look at white's, pardon me, knight b6. Look at white's knights. They're quite nice actually. They're looking at these dark squares, particularly this one on e4. The e5 space gain has given that lovely square, that e4 square, for the white knight here. Black castled. Bishop e3, controlling more that c5 square. Knight d5. And then Adams is prepared here to give up both bishops, not just the light square bishop, but the dark square bishop. Well, he can't really move it back anyway, because of knight takes f4. So this is a practical move as well as positional. So it's the two bishops against the two knights. An interesting scenario which could crop up in the Grand Prix Attack system. Elements of Nimzo Indian. Nimzo Indian, you give up a bishop for greater central control and key square control. And so do you fancy the knights over the bishops, if I ask that question? Who do you prefer? White or black is the question. You've just given black the bishop pair on the plate. Is this crazy stuff? Usually it depends how open the position is, obviously. That's one factor. But black technically has the bishop pair. Will it open up later? It looks unlikely at the moment, especially with the fractured pawn structure. It looks as though the knights are having a great time in this position, to me, anyway. The engine actually favours it as better for white as well, by the way, technically. We have queen b6. Adams doesn't want to repair the pawn structure, obviously. He doesn't want to repair black's pawn structure. Rook a1. That d6 square is controlled quite firmly. Rook f d8. A knight goes there, knight d6. If black ever takes, of course, we're getting the e5 square, as well as a dangerous pawn. We have c takes undoubling, a takes, h6. And now rook d2, simply doubling on d6. Yeah, white has that strong d6 control here to show for the opening. c5, trying to do something with this bishop now on this diagonal. Rook d1, bishop b7. We have king h1, bishop c6, rook d3. White's in control here. Bishop b5, c4. And now actually looks to be attacking with f5, as though f6 is really quite dangerous, among other things, or maybe even well, f6 is a major threat. So e takes f5. We have knight takes f5, threatening the bishop. Queen e6, protecting the bishop. Knight goes back. Rook d7. But white snaps up the c5 pawn now. Yeah, did black have to lose a pawn? Hold on, let's rewind that. That's, by the way, this idea of rewinding, I first heard it from Michael Adams himself, my 18th birthday, or it might be in some other time. Yeah, when he's like looking at games, it's like, even at that time, it's like he's playing for a bit of music. It's like play rewind, fast forward. It's like playing through a bit of music. It caught on with me anyway. It's a comment he made once about rewinding. So anyway, queen at e6. We have knight d6. And so the c5 pawn is attacked. But yeah, how does black actually defend c5 here? Bishop here, isn't some disaster happening? There might be. There might be. It seems white has a powerful sequence in this position. Why the bishop didn't go back? Obviously the queen and rook are helping protect d8, but there's another issue. I might as well just show you. I think, let's see what's going on here. e6, threatening e7. If we take, then take. I think we're going to end up winning the a6 bishop here. Yeah, and there's no back row issue. We can play knight g1. So e6 is remarkably strong here. I mean, that's important to know why black just gave up a pawn here. So queen e6, but knight d6, we're hitting that pawn. We're controlling c8, so there's no rook c8. Not sure how black defends that pawn now. So it seems white's pressure on the dark squares has reached a critical point where he's forcibly winning a pawn on a dark square. Even though black's got the bishops are pretty helpless here. They're pretty miserable. They've gone on strike in this position. Rook d7, we have that pawn being captured. Bishop e7, the queen goes back. The other knight centralizes now with tempo. Giving up, trying to get the queen f7 in. But instead of queen takes f7, even stronger here is the knight fork. Yeah, the knight fork. This is pretty bad news. Pretty bad news. We have bishop takes g2. Check. Queen just takes. King takes f7. And has that sorted out the fork? Well, there's actually another kind of fork. Knight c6 now, walking into another knight fork. And this one is with check now that the king's on f7. So there's no time for anything like rook takes d3. We have queen e6, winning the exchange. Knight takes d8, rook takes d8. And the final crushing move, queen f2 check. So the king, it supports rook e1. So the king, if it goes back, then we win the rook. And if it goes back to e8, then we're going to win the queen with rook takes d8 and rook e1 winning the queen. So that was the end of that after queen f2 check. Now we get a different story, a different theme emerging from this game example. But remember, this was against e6. Yeah, the bishop c4 system has a less appropriate weapon of choice. The more appropriate way is to treat it almost like a reverse Nimzo Indian defense. You see, this was almost like a reverse Nimzo Indian defense. This game, would you say? The knights, they came to be so dominant, black was suffering greatly. This c5 square, you can see the suffering of the c5 square through this game. It remains a kind of weakness. When black tried to do something for its poor bishop, that c5 is even weaker. If black didn't do something for the bishop to play c5, what is that bishop doing in this position? What is it actually doing in this position? This bishop on a6. It's difficult to tell. It's going to be dead. White's just going to build up anyway, probably on d6 here, and play f5 anyway. The bishop wanted to do something active, but it's very difficult here. Yeah? What do you think? So the knights just grew to dominate the position here. Okay, let's have a look at another example. Okay, so did I have another specific example in mind? I did have a look at. There's an interesting example. Someone called Kasparian, not related to Kasparov probably. It was against David Bronstein, who was one of the best players in between the 1940s and 70s. David Bronstein. So this is interesting actually. Bronstein on the black side against the Grand Prix Attack. Okay, Bronstein on the black side of the Grand Prix Attack. So this is in the USSR Championship, Leningrad, 1947, 2nd of March. So e4 from a person called Genrik Kasparian, and it was black was David Bronstein, as in World Championship candidates. Should have beaten Botvinnik if it only hadn't fluffed it up at the end. But what do we know about Kasparian? Just on passing interest, Genrik Kasparian. Was this a motivation for Garry Kasparov's name? Genrik Moisevich Kasparian was born in Tbilisi, Georgia. The Russian Empire. Was awarded the IM title in 1950. International Judge of Chess Compositions in 1956. As a player who was 10 times Armenian champion, and defeated Vitaly Chekova in a match in 1936. He was also an author, analyst and composer. In the field of endgame studies, he is best known, regarded by many as the greatest study composer of all time. That's funny because Garry Kasparov liked studies, compositions. He passed away in Yerevan in 1995. So anyway, so e4 we have c5, knight c3, knight c6, f4, and Bronstein chooses e6, right? Knight f3, d5, and we have this bishop b5, you know, like a reverse Nimzo Indian. Bishop b5, willing to give up your bishop to improve your dark square control. Knight f6, e5, closes up the position. Normally you wouldn't want to play e5, but here you want to make the knights strong. Closing up the position creates the right environment usually for the knights. Close the positions. We give up the bishop. No, we don't want to play d4 because that would just be a bad version of the advanced French defense. This is going to be different here. We don't touch the d pawn. Castles, bishop e7 until now. d3, more modest. Not d4. Castles, and we see this move queen e1. So there's still potential piece coordination of the remaining pieces. We shouldn't be depressed just because the light square bishop has gone away from the scene. We can still coordinate attacking pieces here. Rook b8. b3, trying to suppress that b file, but maybe put this bishop on this diagonal, maybe. Queen e8. Actually it goes to this one. Again, c5 a target. You can see some common themes from the other game. Bishop a6. The bishop is a struggling piece in this sort of position. Knight d1, f5. In fact, white celebrates dark square control with queen a5. Black tries to suck the queen in for some sort of queen trap. No, white doesn't want to be materialistic. White just wants to increase the pressure on the dark squares here. c5. How do we increase the pressure on c5? Knight b2. Nice. We can get a knight here and a queen here, coming back to torture c5. Queen d8. Queen c3. You get this sort of thing in the Nimzo Indian defense. By analogy, you know when you double pawns, if you've ever played the Nimzo, you usually target c4. This is the analogous pawn to the c4 pawn in Nimzo Indian. Target this pawn. Bishop a6, knight a4. The pawn is being tortured. It's the Achilles heel of black's position. d4. Bronstein has committed his pawn structure. Queen d2. Bishop b5. Knight b2. Now that the committed pawn structure, we can celebrate c4. Knight b6, knight c4. We see h6, king h1. Gets out of any trouble. We saw that in the Adams game. You might think, weird prophylaxis move. This diagonal doesn't even seem at all dangerous. Well, it might also support attacking intentions later, like rook g1 and g4 as well. It's a general purpose move. King h7. We see rook a e1, rook b7. And in fact, we do see rook g1 now. Yes. What is black doing, which is active here? How is this bishop ever going to go to exploit this diagonal if we ever play g4? Usually g4 is a major problem if you've got this bishop glaring down this diagonal. That's not going to happen here. We see knight d5. And the dart square celebration starts a bit more here. We see knight d6. c5 is under fire, like in our previous game example. And if black ever takes on d6, isn't he opening up the e5 square? He does. Bronstein does take on d6. We see queen takes, and then rook e5. By blocking f4, we're now threatening knight takes d4 with this nasty pin. We couldn't take immediately here because of the f4 pawn, right? Well, that's one example. Knight takes. Actually, pardon me. We can take this. Apparently, the engine likes this anyway, even in this position. We're still dismantling black here. This is still good. But anyway, white was cautious, okay? He played rook e5. Knight takes d4 is possible here, using the pin. But rook e5, yeah, we've got knight takes d4 coming. Rook f6. White doesn't even play it here. He's pretty casual about it. He could play it here. He builds up a bit more on e6. So he's still got that in the air. Rook b6. He plays it now. And here, look at that e6 pressure. Knight takes e6 coming now. Or rook takes e6. Yes, as in the previous game, this bishop is a real dummy of a piece. It just doesn't belong in this pawn structure. We know a little bit about that from the French defense, that this bishop on c8 can be a really bad bishop. It's a kind of a bit of a French defense pawn structure with this bishop struggling, but biting granite, you know, here on this diagonal as well, this d3 pawn, it's just not doing anything in the position. We see rook a6, supporting the bishop now. So it doesn't even matter, we'd be renewing the pin if there was a rook takes a3. We see knight b4. Now white's ready to take that e6 pawn. Black's position is actually dislocated here. Can't easily defend e6 either. Knight takes e6. And again, the poor c5 pawn might be a concern next move. Or maybe taking here first and then doing something with c5. We see knight takes c2. Queen takes. Rook takes a3. Knight takes c5 would appear possible, but white played actually an even stronger move here. Queen b2. The rook goes to a5. And now we finally get that c5 pawn. There are two key features of this game and the previous game, the dummy bishop and also the c5 torture process, winning c5. Now that c5 has been taken, we have a mighty knight here on c5. And pretty hopeless position. David Bronstein in a bad way here. If the bishop moves, I don't know, what is it doing if it moves back? We just got a very nice position here. He took actually on d3, which doesn't help much. White just took on d3 here and black resigned. Why did David Bronstein resign? Actually, this rook's hanging for a start. If queen takes d3, I think we just take the rook. Yeah, there's nothing more sophisticated than that actually. The rook's hanging in this position. That's not good. So bishop takes d3 was a bit of a blunder, but there's not much else for black to do. Let's say he played this. Rook e6. I think we're just drilling our way to black's king here on the 7th rank. If queen takes here, rook takes, we've won the exchange, because I think this is crushing. Black cannot afford this position, a bishop up, because he's getting mated. Queen f7 and rook e8 are on the cards. They can't help the 7th rank in this position. The best move given by the engine is actually the ridiculous queen e5. That's how bad things are in this particular position. Black's just getting mated. Yeah, so what do we get from this game? It seems a little bit analogous to the previous game. In the bishop b5 systems, it's almost as if you're playing a reverse Nimzo engine defense. You're trying to make sure your knights are brilliant. c5 seems to be a common Achilles heel, and the common dummy piece for the opponent, struggling with the light square bishop a lot of the time. And yeah, it makes players look bad, as if they didn't have any counterplay, because they didn't have much counterplay. That's the reason they look bad. It's a way of embarrassing players. This reverse Nimzo engine is quite dangerous, actually. Okay, yeah, I think I should really have my game examples sorted out a little bit more strictly next week. So should we just call it a day there? Maybe you got something from these 3 notable games. There were 3 notable games we went over this week. So 1 with the bishop c4 system and 2 with the bishop b5 system. And that's the sort of coverage I wanted to do, at least an example of each. So will any of you play? Will any of you ever play the Grand Prix Attack? Because I've got this massive playlist now on YouTube as well. If you haven't seen the Reddit of the week article, I'll give you the link. It's got the playlist link. Well, it's on Reddit R Chess if you want to play chess. If you check out Reddit R Chess, I could type it there, but I can paste the link on YouTube stream. This is the link where you'll find a lot of resources related to this week. But if you want to play chess, you want to check out Reddit's R Chess. What's the URL for that? If I just type that, Reddit R Chess is, because I can't paste in here, I'll just Reddit.com. You'll see if you follow this link, Reddit, and there's a thread here, Reddit opening of the week. Okay. So see you next week. Have a good week. And yeah, thanks for coming. Oh, what have I just done there? All right, thanks for coming. And comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.